Okay, yeah, just let us know. All right, thank you, Rick. Okay, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, June 17th, 2020, and this is a regular meeting of the Montclair Zoning Board of Adjustment. Notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice at the municipal building and also a copy on the township website and sending copies to the Star Ledger and the Montclair Times. Roll call. Mr. Harrison?
Here.
Mr. Fleischer?
Here.
Mr. Church?
Here.
Mr. McCullough?
Present.
Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Moore. Mr. Allen is absent this evening. Ms. Harris? Mr. Allen is
Here.
absent this evening. Ms. Harris? Mr. Simon?
Here.
And Mr. Caulfield?
Here.
And Ms. Gilmer is excused this evening. And Mr. Sullivan?
Here. Okay. We have the minutes of the May 6th meeting. I have a couple of changes on page 1, line 33, where it says pick up and drop off. The word of should go after drop off. It says drop off of seniors. And then on page 3, line 27 at the end, it should be in, not din. And then I guess that's line 27 as well. Capitalized township at the beginning of the line and capitalized township on line 31. Okay, I don't have any other changes to those minutes. Does anyone else have any changes?
No.
No.
Okay. Someone want to move?
Move approval of the minutes as corrected by the chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any no votes? Okay, we have the minutes of the May 20th meeting on page 2, line 7. Second word, replace that with weather. I don't have any other changes to those minutes. Does anyone else have any other changes?
Move approval of the minutes as submitted, as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and then we have the resolution for Dolgan, 12 Washington Street. I don't have any changes to that resolution. Does anyone else have any changes?
Move approval of the resolution as submitted.
Second.
In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposed? We have the resolution for the Dysel property at 16 Bradford Avenue. On page 2, number condition 8. I think it should say put storm drain. Okay, just add storm before drain. And then a question on the condition. Was it the board engineer or the township engineer who was going to review the stormwater?
I believe it was the township engineer, but it wasn't really clear. We talked about both. So,
Well, why don't we do the township engineer? Probably makes more sense
okay.
because it's a connection to the township sewer line in the right of way. Okay, then we have the Altshuler resolution for North Brookwood Road. I don't have it.
We need a motion to approve that.
Motion to approve the Daiso resolution as corrected. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Just trying to move things along. We have the Altshuler resolution. I don't have any changes. Does anyone else have any changes?
No.
Move approval of the, yes, I have a correction on the first page in the heading. There's an extra G in there.
Thank you.
Move approval of the resolution as submitted.
There a second? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? And then we have the resolution for Thomas Hickey on North Fullerton Avenue. I just have one. You have number 3 on page 1. You have the acreage wrong. I mean, 10,000 square feet is going to be a little less than a quarter of an acre, not 0.63 acres. I didn't do the math to figure out exactly, but you know, it's going to be 0.23 or 0.24.
Okay.
Any other changes? Those meant to that resolution? Someone want to move the resolution?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain. Caulfield.
Mr. Caulfield, yes.
Okay, and with that, I have to recuse myself because I have a conflict on the next application, or the only application. So good night all. I'll see you in July.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Graham, you're going to read the notice?
Sure, yes, and I'll announce the application. The first and only application we have scheduled for this evening is application 2664 by Montclair Unicorn Partners for property at 3A North Willow Street and 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue. Hang on one second, I'll be reading the notice. They filed a site plan approval to construct a third floor addition to the existing building located at 3A North Willow Street. Convert the expanded building to retail, restaurant, or office use on the first floor and uses on the upper floors, and remove a wood deck and exterior staircase and install center courtyard, a new roof stair, egress, and open stairs to connect the 3 existing buildings. The applicant has also applied for the following variances. A D1 variance to permit the first floor office use located at the building at 3A North Willow Street, used as office, whereas Montclair Code Section 347-80B provides that office uses are not permitted on the first floor of buildings in the center area of the C1 business zone. A variance from Montclair Code Section 347-83B4 to permit a rear yard setback of 10 feet for the third floor addition to the building at 3A North Willow Street, whereas the ordinance requires a minimum rear yard setback of 10 feet. A variance from Montclair Code Section 347-83B4 to permit a rear yard setback of 10 feet from the proposed roof stair to be constructed at the rear of the buildings at 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue, whereas the ordinance requires a minimum rear yard setback of 10 feet. A variance from Montclair Code Section 347-101 to permit a wall-mounted name sign to be installed on the rear of the building at 3A North Willow Street, whereas the ordinance does not permit such signs in the proposed location. The applicant also requests any other variance or waivers that may be required in connection with this application.
Thank you, Graham.
Sure.
Mr. Chemulaki, ready to go?
I think so, Mr. Fleischer. Good evening, Mr. Fleischer, members of the board. For the record, I'm Alan Trembulac, appearing on behalf of the applicants, which are Montclair Unicorn Partners, LLC, and Preservation Partners, LLC. As the notice indicates, this is an application for site plan approval, 1 D variance, and 3 C variances. The application relates to 2 properties, namely 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue and 3A North Willow Street. Both of these the properties are owned by separate limited liability companies, and both companies are either owned or controlled by Stephen Plofker, who also, I should state, own various other properties at this location in town, namely the corner of Bloomfield Avenue and North Willow Street, including the building on the corner, which is coincidentally where I'm sitting right now. Primary focus of this application is the property at 3A North Willow Street. This is a landlocked parcel located approximately 160 feet from North Willow Street. Property has no street frontage either on Bloomfield Avenue or North Willow Street, and rather, as I just indicated, is set back a substantial distance from North Willow Street. It's sort of tucked in the corner behind buildings located on Bloomfield Avenue, and particularly the building at 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue. As I indicated, it's a landlocked parcel, but access to the building at 3A North Willow Street is provided by virtue of a recorded access agreement, or I should say access easement, which allows vehicles and pedestrians to cross through the parking lot located on North Willow Street, behind the building on the corner at 363. And again, that parking lot is utilized for ingress and egress to and from the building at 3A North Willow Street, which again is the focus of this application. And the plan before you this evening, which Paul Sionis will describe in detail in a few minutes, is to do several things. Most importantly, Mr. Plofker intends to renovate this older industrial-looking masonry building, and renovate that, and also to add a 3rd floor addition to that building, and to convert the building to be used entirely as office use. And the reason we're here this evening before this board and not the planning board is because we're proposing the entire building to be used for offices, and as the board knows, in the central business district, the zoning ordinance does not allow for office use on the 1st floor of buildings. So we need a variance to permit this building to be used, the entire building, including the 1st floor, as office space. And I think, as you'll hear through the testimony, there's certainly a valid justification for that, given the location of this building, with no storefront and very little visibility from any street, including North Willow Street. In addition to, I should say that we're also proposing various other improvements, including the creation of a new courtyard located between the building at 3A North Willow Street and the rear of 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue, and a number of other site improvements, which Mr. Sionis will discuss. As I indicated, in addition to the D variance for the office use, we're also seeking 3 C variances, and those 3 variances all relate to rear yard setbacks, which again will be reviewed in detail. I should also point out 2 things. We noticed for 2 sign variances, but turns out we don't need either of those variances. One of the variances was for a sign which had been shown on an earlier version of the plan, but was eliminated after we appeared before the Development Review Committee. So that variance is not required. And we also included a notice for what's referred to as a ghost sign that was also shown on these plans, but it's actually a sign that my client would prefer not to have. We don't want to ask for a variance for that sign because candidly, we really don't want the sign. It was added to the plans simply to show what it would look like, and that was again a suggestion of the Development and Review Committee, but something that's not preferred by my client. The last thing I would note is that we are exempt from providing any additional off-street parking for this application by virtue of the zoning ordinance, which allows for an exemption from providing parking where there's a building addition of less than 15%. And Mr. Petto has confirmed in his memorandum that that exception is applicable to this case. So, having said that, I have two witnesses to present this evening, and my first witness would be Stephen Plofker.
Mr. Plofker, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
There you go.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Mr. Plofker, are you the principal owner of Montclair Unicorn Partners, LLC?
Yes.
Okay, and is that limited liability company the owner of the property at 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and are you also the principal owner of Preservation Partners, LLC?
Yes, I am.
And does that company own the property at 3A North Willow Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you provide the board with an overview of what your plans are with respect to the property, particularly the property at 3A North Willow Street?
Graham, could you pull up an aerial or a site plan with the surrounding buildings, if you can? I've been renovating buildings in that immediate area probably for the last 15 years, starting at 7 North Willow Street, which was an old and the next renovations were the corner building that now houses the taqueria, and the buildings adjacent to that that had been in a fire. This building is tucked in the back of the parking lot. It was formerly not owned by me and occupied at first in my tenure by a contractor who used it for storage and manufacturing of cabinetry or whatever. He then leased it to a restoration company, a fire restoration company. And that was the last industrial use, and I purchased it within the last year. And coming to the board because I'm not sure that retail is appropriate for that ground floor, and in order to rent it for an office, which of all the surrounding buildings, and Paul will get into this, all the surrounding buildings are all used for the ground floor except for the street frontage ground floor space, which are all retail spaces.
Okay, just to talk about the proposal for office space. You know, in your opinion, based on your experience as the owner of numerous commercial properties in the town of Montclair and elsewhere, do you believe that this building is suitable for use as a retail establishment or a personal service establishment?
Probably not. It's 150 plus feet from the street. It has no street frontage, so it's unlikely that will be the use for
Okay.
Although it's a phenomenal old building with old timbers and nice ceiling height. The advantage to this, it's a fairly small building, fairly small, narrow building that I can offer tenants much smaller footprints than I can in the surrounding buildings, which the floor sizes are much bigger and the smallest office units are much bigger. I'll be able to break down offices in this building much less than 1,000 feet configuration in the courtyard, which Paul will show you. And so, yeah, I think it's eminently suitable for office. And these are the type of offices that are in the surrounding buildings, which tend to be in the creative industries,
Okay.
in media industries, some financial, some, but a lot of sort of the newer technologies seem to be attracted to the less traditional office space. I like to point out we have, I think we'll see after, what happens in the next, 6 months, but going into the pandemic, we had 0 office vacancy in any surrounding building.
Okay. And again, just one follow-up question, again, based upon your experience, do you find that most people having a retail establishment or a personal service establishment require that they have visibility to the street?
Yes. In most cases, yes.
Okay. All right.
This is hidden. This is a really tucked away hidden building.
Right. Okay. That's all I have for Mr. Plofker, Mr. Fleischer.
Do any members of the board have any questions for this witness?
I do.
Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Foster. Just a quick question. The courtyard is going to be redone, is that correct? I mean, Paul will talk about that, but the courtyard is going to be redone, is that correct?
Yeah, completely.
Location?
Paul will discuss it. To me, that's almost the most exciting part of the project is
Okay.
the courtyard we're going to create between the two buildings.
And you have the jazz kids there too, right? So it looks like they use that courtyard too. That will continue, I guess?
No, it's Paul, you must have photographs of the existing conditions. No, it's sort of a new courtyard where right now it's in an elevated, old, obsolete wooden deck that's really not used except for egress to the rear of the Bloomfield Avenue buildings. So it'll sort of be new space that we're creating. Yeah, I think the Jazz House kids will find it really usable.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the board with questions for this witness?
No.
I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
Tremulock, back to you.
Okay, my next witness would be Paul Sionis.
Mr. Sionis, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
My name is Paul Sionis. My office address is 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proposing to present Mr. Sionis as professional architect and professional planner.
And I presume his license is still active?
I hope so.
Then he's on.
All right, Paul, did your office prepare the site plan and the architectural drawings for this application?
Yes.
All right, and have you also prepared a PowerPoint presentation for your use in presenting those plans and reviewing them this evening for the board?
Yes, I did.
1 second. And we're getting feedback from somebody, quite a bit of it. Do we, anyway, tell me where it's coming from?
I'm that's what I was just trying to figure that out. I'll take a look as folks start talking again. I'll see who's giving us the feedback.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Sionis, I'm sorry.
Okay,
And Paul, the PowerPoint presentation, that's been presented to the board before the hearing tonight, correct?
correct.
I say, let's mark that as Exhibit A1.
Okay. Okay. All right, Paul, utilizing the PowerPoint presentation, would you review the plans for the board?
Yes. So we're looking at slide number 1, which is currently on the screen. And slide number 1 is a view looking east from North Willow Street across the parking lot towards 3A North Willow, which has been circled with an orange oval circle. So this is an application to improve and add to 3A North Willow Street, to convert it to office space, and then to merge 3A North Willow with the adjoining 339, 345 Bloomfield Avenue site. So the applicant, Mr. Plofker, purchased 3A North Willow in 2019. And it's my understanding that years ago, 3A North Willow was used as the ice house for Giblin's Liquors and its predecessor, which was located at 345 Bloomfield Avenue. So when the prior owner, 2 prior owners prior to Mr. Plofker purchased 3A North Willow, they showed me some of the equipment still within the building that was used for chopping and cutting large blocks of ice. And it was tied in with Giblin's Liquors and the previous owner of Giblin's Liquors, which was at 345 Bloomfield Avenue. And thus, we've been calling this the Ice House Project. So most recently, as Stephen mentioned, it was used as contractor offices. It was warehouse space and storage space, plus there was indoor garage space on the ground floor for contractor vehicles, in addition to other warehouse space. So this is an application for a use variance and site plan approval to construct a 1,726 square foot addition to the top of this existing landlocked building. Graham, if you could do slide 2. Slide 2, this is a view looking north from Bloomfield Avenue. And this is 343 and 345 Bloomfield Avenue. 345 is on the left. That was the one that was originally, well, for a while it was Giblin's Liquors. That building was built in 1890. And then 343 had a lot of different uses. That was built in 1920. So the application is to merge these properties with 3A North Willow Street, which is directly to the rear or to the north of these 2 buildings. 343 and 345 are occupied by retail and restaurant type uses on the ground floor. There's an office user on the second floor of 345 Bloomfield Avenue. Slide 3, Graham. So slide 3, this is from Bing satellite. It's a Bing satellite image, and it shows that 3A North Willow is just to the north of Bloomfield Avenue. It's an interior lot. It's located between North Willow Street to the west and Lackawanna Plaza to the east. 3A is next to a multi-story mixed-use building that fronts onto Lackawanna Plaza. It has some residential use, some office use, and it also adjoins directly to the east the 2-story commercial building that fronts onto Bloomfield Avenue that has Fashion Restaurant on the ground floor. So as Alan stated, Mr. Plofker owns several properties within this block and within the surrounding area. So at the northwest corner, at the top of this satellite view labeled Glen Willow, that's where a new residential building that's named Glen Willow is currently under construction. It'll have new dwelling units in addition to 2 floors of indoor parking. And when we got approval for that project, additional parking was planned for within that building, more than what was needed for that building, so it could accommodate some of the surrounding properties that Mr. Plofker owns. He also owns 7 North Willow, which is the long, skinny building that spans from North Willow down to Lackawanna Plaza. That was an automobile dealership prior to Stephen purchasing that building. That has offices within the building, and then it has the Pete's Pizzeria directly at the front of the building where it faces North Willow Street. Stephen also owns the Phoenix building, which is at the corner of North Willow and Bloomfield Avenue. It was named the Phoenix because there was a pretty bad fire in there in the 1980s. It burned significantly. It was rebuilt. Stephen has rehabilitated, redeveloped this project. It has underground parking in the lower level, and then it has restaurant and retail uses at the ground floor, and then offices at the floors above. There's also the two parking lots between the Phoenix and 7 North Willow is owned by Stephen owns. He also owns what's labeled the Billiards Building, and that's next door to and directly to the east of the Phoenix building. We've called it that because when Stephen bought it, there was a billiards parlor in the building. And then also 345 and 339-343 Bloomfield Avenue. He also has owned those properties. Those were originally called the Unicorn Buildings. I forget why. But that's part of this application tonight because the intent is to merge those two buildings and the property that they're on with the lot that 3A North Willow is on. Stephen also owns directly to the west side on North Willow Street. He owns the corner of North Willow and Bloomfield Avenue, the old Diva Lounge property, and he received approval to develop that property several years ago. All of Stephen's properties are in very good condition since they've all been redeveloped over the last 20 years or less. Next slide, please, slide 4. So slide 4 is an aerial map. This is based on a Bing Maps. It shows that in purple is lot 18. Lot 18 is used for parking. It has 27 parking stalls. And then in green, you can see there's a right-of-way. It's an 8-foot wide township right-of-way or easement that extends from North Willow Street to the west down to Lackawanna Plaza to the east. So it passes through the entire lot just to the north of the subject property. And this is a concrete sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk that the public is allowed to use. Next slide, please, slide 5. Slide 5 is from the township tax map. And from this map, you could see lots 3 and 3.01. So 3.01 is the primary subject of this application. That contains the 3A North Willow building. And then lot 3 contains the other 339-343 and 345 Bloomfield Avenue. And then the other lot 18, also in orange, is an existing parking lot that's subject part of this application because we're proposing a new trash and recycling enclosure within that parking lot. As you can see, lot 3.01 has no street frontage. The only access it has to the public right away is to that 8-foot wide township easement, which then you would cross to get into lot 18, the parking lot. Slide 6, please. Slide 6, the right side of slide 6 is from the Montclair zoning map. And you can see that 3A North Willow and 339-345 Bloomfield Avenue are located in the C1 central business center area zone. The parking lot on lot 18, where we're proposing the new trash recycling enclosure, is located in the C3 zone. So the C1 zone that 3A North Willow is located in allows buildings up to a height of 6 stories tall. Office use is permitted in the building, but not on the first floor. And the allowable uses on the first floor include retail use or restaurant use. But we're asking for a variance to use the first floor of the building as office space. Slide 7, please, Graham. Slide 7, the left side is the existing survey map of the property and the surrounding lots, but it's been colored for better visibility. This is a survey map that Lakeland Surveying prepared in 2019. You can see the large parking lot, the two parking areas. One is lot 18 and one is lot 17. Those two parking areas are divided by a landscape strip with large calorie pear trees down the center. There's a transformer in the center of the lot, electrical transformer. And then there's also on the left side or the west side of that large strip is a guardhouse or a place where a parking attendant, a paid parking attendant is housed. So there's a parking attendant on this property. You could see at the bottom part of this survey map, there's a note pointing to an existing wood deck that currently spans between 3A North Willow Street and then the rear of 339, 343, and 345 Bloomfield Avenue. There's 4 photographs on this slide. The top right photo is the view looking. The top left photo is the west-facing facade of North Willow Street. So you see there was a large overhead garage door. This was used for contractor previously to drive in and out with construction vehicles through this door. The contractor secured an easement through the parking lots to be able to access this building from North Willow Street through lot 18. The top right photo is the view looking between the south side of 3A North Willow and the rear of 339, 345 Bloomfield Avenue with the raised wood deck that connects the buildings, in addition to an existing wood stair with wood railing at the rear of 345 Bloomfield Avenue. The bottom photo, the bottom left photo shows the rear of 339, 343 Bloomfield Avenue and the existing raised wood deck that connects the rear of those Bloomfield Avenue buildings and the south side of 3A North Willow Street. The history of the deck is that when a group of investors purchased this property in the mid-1980s, their thought was that they'd create this deck to make it usable space between the buildings and they would hope to attract restaurants for 339-343 Bloomfield Avenue. That never happened. They never invested the funds to make it happen. The deck was never kept up and it wasn't really used as restaurant seating back there. Instead, it's just been storage over the years. And they built that wood stair on the back of 345 Bloomfield Avenue in that top right photo to provide a second means of egress from the second floor of that building. The bottom right photo is a view of the public alley that's just to the north of 3A North Willow Street. So that it's the alley, as I said, traverses from all the way from actually the north side of 3A North Willow down to Lackawanna Plaza. 22 feet of 3A North Willow fronts onto this right of way, and then another 150 feet of other properties occupies the rest of the alley. Again, going from this subject property down to the public sidewalk at Lackawanna Plaza. And you can see in that photo on the bottom right that the left side of that photo is the top of the masonry wall of the Montclair Auto Parts building, which faces Lackawanna Plaza. So the Montclair Auto Parts building is a tall, one-story building. That's the roof of the Montclair Auto Parts building, and the entire roof, the walls surrounding the roof has a 6-foot-high chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it. So that's on 3 sides of that building, both the south side, the west side, and the north side of that building. Next slide, please, Graham. Slide 8.
Hang on 1 second. Okay. Slide 8.
Okay. Slide 8 are additional photos within the current the wood deck courtyard. The top, you can see at the top left, the 3A North Willow. This is a view to the north of 3A North Willow, the old Ice House building. It was constructed with this rusticated block. Many of the windows were filled in with block over the years. The top right photo is a view to the northeast, looking also at that south side of the Ice House building, showing how those windows were infilled with block over the years. Bottom left photo is a view standing on the wood deck, looking basically to the west or a bit to the northwest. The Ice House is on the right, 339, 343 is on the left. The two-story building with that exhaust duct is 345 Bloomfield Avenue. And then the building beyond is what we call the billiards building. So it's the red brick with the light-colored panels at the upper floor. And that building is the home of Jazz House Kids at the ground floor. The bottom photo is a view, another view of the northeast, looking to the northeast of the south wall of the Ice House building. The building was built with a combination of brick and that rusticated block. And as I stated, many of the windows were infilled or small windows were put into larger openings in a pretty unattractive way. Slide 9, please. Right. Slide 9 is the proposed site plan. So the proposal is to create a new top floor addition to 3A North Willow. So it's a new one-story brick addition. The addition would have a floor area of 1,726 square feet. And the 1,700 square feet is slightly less than 15% of the total floor area of this building, plus the buildings at 339, 343, and 345 Bloomfield Avenue. So the proposal is to merge these two properties, Lot 3 and 3.01. By merging these two properties, it encourages Stephen to renovate and redevelop 3A North Willow, but also gain a small addition. So the addition is smaller than the footprint of the building, and I'll show the floor plans, but it's inset from the lower floor levels to create some terrace space. So the goal also with this proposal is to completely remove that raised wood deck and the wood exterior stair that were built in the 1980s that connect 3A North Willow to the front Bloomfield Avenue building, and then to replace that deck with a new on-grade courtyard space with a new masonry paver surface and planters within the courtyard. We're also proposing a new metal walkway connector and a new open metal stair to connect the three buildings that are on lots 3 and 3.01. So you'll see better images of what I'm talking about with the metal walkway connectors and the metal stair, but it's something that's pretty exciting. It's not many people will be able to see this space unless they go into this space. It's not visible from any surrounding properties, but it will be an exciting space to be within, both for people visiting and also for people who work within these buildings. As part of this application, we're proposing a new common trash enclosure that could serve many of the buildings that are under common ownership. Currently, the dumpsters sit in the parking lot at this location at Grand Circling, but we're proposing a new 11-foot by 16-foot trash enclosure to accommodate dumpsters and trash from some of these buildings, including 3A North Willow, 7 North Willow, and 339, 343, and 345 Bloomfield Avenue. So the trash enclosure will comply with the township requirements, and that'll have solid walls and a roof. It'll be 6 feet high with a roof. The location of this enclosure was suggested at the Development Review Commission by the consulting engineer as a place that could not take away any parking spaces and actually be in a location that could serve the surrounding properties. There was a question about opening the doors from this trash enclosure. when a car is parked directly to the south, which is parking stall number 13. But the days and hours of collection for this trash enclosure will be as directed by the owner. And typically the hours and days of trash collection are in particular the hours are early in the morning before anyone is within this parking lot. So we don't think that will be a problem or an issue. There are existing trees within the parking lot. There's the calorie pear trees as shown as the green circles. So those will remain. The parking within lot 18 will remain as it is now, which is 27 parking spaces. On the drawing, it showed a striped area for access to a loading area. Graham, if you could circle that, just south of where you yes. So on the drawing, it showed the striping, painted striping, crossing over the public right-of-way. We don't intend to stripe the public right-of-way, so the striping will not take place on that right-of-way. Next slide, please, Graham.
Okay.
Slide number 10. Slide number 10 is site lighting. We identified all of the light fixtures on the site surrounding lots 18 and lot 17 directly above it. We identified light fixtures along the north side of the buildings that face Bloomfield Avenue. And then we're proposing new light fixtures within the courtyard and also on the facade of 3A North Willow Street. So we obtained all of the foot candle spreads for the existing light fixtures and also calculated the foot candle spreads for the new light fixtures. And then we prepared this drawing on slide 10 to show the line of the 0.5 foot candles, which is a township requirement as a minimum level of exterior illumination. So the 0.5 foot candles is shown with the dashed lines, and then the light yellow indicates everything that's 0.5 foot candles or above. And then the circles indicate the locations of the existing and proposed light fixtures. Slide 11, please. Both for this application and for the Historic Commission application, we were asked to show views from approximately 500 feet away. So these are images that were developed from using Google Earth. And this slide shows the existing view of 3A North Willow Street on the left, as seen from up high above Bloomfield Avenue, looking from the south. So the image on the left is the existing condition, and then the image on the right shows it with the new top floor addition. Next slide, please. Slide 12. Slide 12 is the existing versus proposed from above North Willow Street, looking from the west. So this slide shows the existing view of 3A North Willow on the left, and then the proposed view on the right with the new top floor addition. This was also this slide was also developed using Google Earth satellite view. Slide 13, please. Slide 13 is an image that was developed for the Historic Preservation Commission presentation. This is a view of the new brick top floor addition above the existing building, and you can see the lower two floors have that rusticated stone facade, and we're proposing new windows, a lot of glass openings within the existing masonry walls, as you can see. And you can see from this image, the top floor will be stepped in order to create some terrace space. The terrace at the top right there would be covered with a standing seam metal roof canopy. And then it'll be surrounded with a wire mesh cable railing at that top floor. But the goal is to have a lot of large glass openings, make this an exciting space for someone to work within. The rusticated stone will remain on that ground floor, but that new top floor addition will be brick. Next slide, please. 14. Slide 14 are the views of the entry into the courtyard and partial view into that court. So these are images that were prepared for the Historic Commission. View on the left is looking at the west side of 3A North Willow Street and plus the entry into the courtyard, the pedestrian entry. 340, that canopy with 347 on it is actually the entry within the billiards building, the adjoining billiards building, down into the Jazz House kids space. The image on the right begins to look into the court with the new roofed metal stair that will provide access to the rear of 345 Bloomfield Avenue on the right, and then also to the new metal balconies and the terrace along the south side of 3A North Willow Street. Next slide, please. Slide 15.
Okay.
So slide 15 is a cross section through the courtyard. And it's a cross section through the space between the buildings that front Bloomfield Avenue. So looking at this, our back is to the Unicorn building, the 339-343 Bloomfield Avenue. And we're facing the south side of 3A North Willow. But this is showing that there'll be a new a balcony walkway at the second floor level, at the second floor above grade, to access both the interior of the building and to provide an amenity to the tenants. It also shows a balcony or terrace at the top floor with that standing seam metal roof. So there'll be access both from within the building to get to these exterior balconies, but also from this new metal stair. This roof metal stair will take the place of the old wood stair from the 1980s. Slide 6. Yes.
Paul, just sorry to interrupt, but just a quick question while we're looking at the courtyard, and you can address one of the comments in the engineer's report. Will there be vehicular access permitted into the courtyard area?
No, a vehicle will not be able to get back there because of the new metal stairway.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please, Graham, 16. So these are images, or these are 4 views of the building that, in my opinion, would be difficult to see if not for a drawing. So if you're standing on the site in the courtyard or in the parking area or in the public alley, the right-of-way, it'd be difficult to see any of these views. So the top left is the view from within the courtyard, very similar to the image I just showed. The top right is a partial view above the adjacent building to the east. So this is, bottom portion is the building that contains the restaurant Fashion directly to the east. And then this is the portion directly above that. The bottom left is a view as if you were able to stand on the roof, that fenced-in roof on top of the Montclair Auto Parts building that faces Lackawanna Plaza. So that building is known as 16 Lackawanna Plaza. Again, you would not be able to see this view. You can see there's a terrace or a courtyard at the top left of that, which I'll show on the floor plans. And then the bottom right is a view looking from the west with the public alley on the left side of this image. So the public alley that goes down to Lackawanna Plaza is at the bottom left of this image. So directly below the sign that says the Ice House, that faces that public alley, and then the public alley starts to slope down as it goes down to Lackawanna Plaza. Next slide, 17, please. This is the ground floor plan. So this ground floor was contractor storage, contractor garage. Prior to that, my recollection was that it was used for the owner of Grove Pharmacy had owned this in the early 1980s and used it for dead file storage for Grove Pharmacy before it was the contractor storage. Prior to Grove Pharmacy, it was the Ice House where they actually chopped large blocks of ice for people to purchase, and they used it for Giblin's Liquors and Giblin's predecessor. But the proposal is to convert this into office space, put a new stairway inside of the building, new barrier-free bathrooms, and have this flexible office space, but with large glass openings open to the courtyard, the proposed paver masonry courtyard that's directly to the south of this building. We're proposing planters within the courtyard. We're proposing fiberglass planters with native planting, so there'll be different grass-type ground covers in addition to small witch hazel trees that bloom in January to make this interesting. The ground floor has approximately 2,888 or 2,895 square feet of space, and that's existing space. Next slide, please, Graham. Slide 18, this is the floor above. So this, again, will be a large open space. It'll be the same square footage as the floor below. However, this will have access to that balcony that connects to the stair tower to the left or to the west. So there'll be this metal balcony with the mesh, the wire mesh railing directly on the south side of this floor. And there'll be a doorway where there's a red triangle where anyone could enter this office space or exit the office space from that door onto this balcony, and then take steps down to that existing metal stairway. There's still, we're proposing a new stairway within the building. Next slide, please, slide 19. Slide 19 is the proposed addition. So this is a smaller footprint than the floors below. It will step in while it will provide a new 12-foot by 23-foot outdoor roof terrace at the northeast corner of the building, labeled proposed roof terrace, plus the 8-foot deep by 53-foot wide roof terrace with the wire mesh railing across the south side of the facade. So this south-facing roof terrace will have also access to the new stair tower. And then, in discussions with Steve and the applicant, he feels that because of the current pandemic, that more tenants are going to be looking for outdoor spaces, such as this outdoor balcony and the roof terraces, plus the courtyard in the future, in the current times plus the future. Slide 20, please. Slide 20 is the proposed roof plan. And basically, it's a flat roof that's surrounded by a 3-foot 6-inch high parapet to surround all of the roof of the building. And the point of the 3-foot 6-inch high parapet is to screen the view of the rooftop HVAC units. As a placeholder, we're showing 4 HVAC rooftop units in the center of the roof. We're not sure of the exact number, but we feel with the 3-foot 6-inch high parapet, these will not be visible from any of the surrounding properties. Next slide, please. Slide 21. Slide 21 shows the details for the proposed fiberglass planters that are to be within the courtyard. That's on the bottom right of that slide. We have the proposed trash enclosure detail at the top right of that slide, and that's to be a corrugated metal enclosure with a corrugated metal roof. It's approximately 6 feet high. The township requires trash enclosures to have roofs, so we're proposing a roof to be in compliance. It keeps it neater, it keeps the rain out of the trash inside the enclosure. On this slide is also the courtyard paver detail, so it'll be a concrete paver set also in a concrete base. And then we'll also have details of all of the existing and the proposed light fixtures on this site and on the adjoining properties. The bottom of the slide is the plant schedule, basically the 2 plants proposed for the planters. There's, as I said, there's a, and both are native to northern New Jersey. There's the witch hazel small trees or large shrubs, and then that ice dance grasses to be planted within the planters. And then there's a light fixture schedule at the top left of the slide showing what each of the light fixtures are, both the existing and proposed, and the mounting height above the ground. So these light fixtures give us the conforming 0.5 foot candle spread throughout the site. Next slide, please, slide 22. Slide 22, the top right has a schedule of the proposed signs with a key map on the left side of this slide. Plus, there are images on the bottom indicating where these signs would be on the facade. As Alan Tremulak stated in his opening statement, Stephen has decided not to do slide number 2. Slide number 2 was a wall-mounted sign known as a ghost sign that would be painted on the north brick wall of 363 Bloomfield Avenue, which is known as the Phoenix Building. He's decided not to do this sign and not to ask for a variance to do this sign. The sign was suggested at the Development Review Commission to help direct visitors to the back of the property, but preference is not to have the sign at all and not to ask for the variance. All right. All of the other signs are in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Let's go to slide number 3, please. We were asked to provide a map that indicates all parking within a reasonable walking distance to the subject property. So on this slide is drawn an 800 foot radius, or approximately a 1/6 or 1/7 of a mile from the subject property. The subject property is shown in red and labeled subject property in the center of that circle. So we drew an 800 foot radius. And again, I said that's equal to about 1/6 or 1/7 of a mile, which is basically less than walking once around a high school walking track. So once around a walking track is a quarter of a mile. So this is less than walking around a track. So we're showing all of the parking, existing parking within that 800 foot radius. So the map shows 53 total spaces, both on lots 18 and lot 17, which are owned by Mr. Plofker. So that's number 2 and number 2A on this chart. So there are 27 spaces on lot 2, labeled as lot 2, and 26 spaces on labeled as lot 2A. There were the brown streets, the streets that we labeled brown or tan, those have all metered street parking. So we're showing that, on Bloomfield Avenue, there's 64 metered spaces. On North Willow Street, directly adjoining this property, there are 9 metered spaces. Glenridge Avenue from Greenwood Avenue, heading towards Bloomfield Avenue, there's 30 spaces, and then there's non-metered spaces on Forest, North Willow, and Greenwood. But those have time limits. Those have signs that state 2-hour parking. You can see on Forest Street there's 25 spaces, 10 spaces on North Willow, and 21 spaces on Greenwood. And then in dark gray, labeled number 1 in the square box, is the Midtown parking lot. The Midtown parking lot is the site of the proposed Midtown parking deck. The Midtown parking lot in its current condition before construction began, 316 spaces, part of which were permit spaces, and then others were metered spaces. According to the township officials, the new Midtown parking deck will hold up to 326 spaces. So it's 10 more spaces than the parking lot had, but a decision has not been made on the allocation of permit versus non-permit spaces to be made available. So there will be 326 parking spaces in the deck, but an allocation of permits versus non-permits has not been determined by the township. Also, there's, as you know, there's public transportation buses along Bloomfield Avenue that go in both directions to New York and also to Newark and to Wayne and up to Montclair State University. Next slide, please, slide 24. As part of the application, we're asked to provide streetscape views from both directions. So these are drawings that we prepared. This view on slide 24, this is the view showing 7 North Willow, which is where Stephen Plofker's office is. The front left of the building has the Pete's Pizzeria. The rest of the building contains office space at this level. To the center, to the right of 7 North Willow is, you see that chain link fence. It doesn't really show the barbed wire on top of the fence, but that's a chain link fence on top of the roof for Montclair Auto Parts building that faces Lackawanna Plaza. To the right of that, you can see a small opening that's part of that public alley that goes down to Lackawanna Plaza. We're looking at this on an angle, so this is an 8-foot wide public alley, but it looks smaller in this view because of the angle. To the right of the arrow that Graham just drew is the Ice House building. The lower portion is that existing rusticated block, and then the upper portion is the new brick addition. The building to the right is that Phoenix building, the building that's at the northeast corner of Bloomfield Avenue and North Willow Street. That's also owned by Stephen. So that building has office space on the upper floors, and then it has the taqueria restaurant on the ground floor and the west side. And the nice thing about this building is that the lower level was excavated out probably 40 years ago, and there's a parking garage inside of that building for use of the tenants of that building. Next slide, please, slide 25. Slide 25 is the streetscape view from Bloomfield Avenue. So this slide shows 339, 343, which is currently labeled as 343, even though it's legally listed as 339-343 Bloomfield Avenue. That's on the right. In the center, the 2-story building is 345 Bloomfield Avenue. The building to the left of that is 347 Bloomfield Avenue. That's the building I referred to as the billiards building, since it had a billiard parlor for many years. And then to the left of that on this slide is the Phoenix building, the 363, 367 Bloomfield Avenue. And then the point of showing this is that the view of the new addition on top of 3A North Willow directly to the rear or to the north of 343 Bloomfield Avenue. And then to the right of that is the 2-story commercial building that has the Fashion restaurant on the ground floor. The image on the bottom of this slide is a diagram. It's a sightline diagram showing what a pedestrian would see from the south side of Bloomfield Avenue. So the public sidewalk on the south side of Bloomfield Avenue, looking towards the new addition and what the line of sight would be. And the line of sight, you would see 6 feet of the proposed building addition when standing across the street from the sidewalk. Obviously, you're on the second floor of a building on Bloomfield, on the south side of Bloomfield Avenue, you would see more of the new addition, but from the public sidewalk on the south side of Bloomfield Avenue, you would only see 6 feet of that proposed addition. Graham, next I'd like to go to the animation. So we have a
Sure.
We have a 40-second drawing animation that really helps it clarify what this proposal is.
And this animation will be Exhibit A2.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Graham.
All right, here we go.
Hold on. Okay, thank you. So the animation was done because it's difficult to explain this project with 2D drawings. Therefore, we had to do the animation to make this easier to understand, both looking from almost a bird's eye view and walking through the site, exploding some of the walls of the building. It's a small courtyard. It's like 11 or 1,200 square foot courtyard. It's only 20 feet deep from the rear of the Bloomfield Avenue building to the south side of the 3A North Willow, the Ice House building. But it's tough to show with a 2D drawing, so therefore we did the animation. If we could go to slide 27, please.
Paul, before you go into the variances, I just want two questions, again, to address comments in the township reports. I think both Graham Petto's report and the engineer's report asked if you could just discuss loading for the site.
Right, so
Whether there's any changes proposed for loading.
Right, proposals are not changed for loading. Loading historically was between the current billiards building where the entrance to the Jazz House Kids is, and to the westerly side of the Ice House building. Loading was there because this was used for contractors' storage. Contractors' vehicles drove into that building. We're showing a striped area within the parking lot. This could be reserved for loading. Stephen, do you have any comments on your preference for loading? If you're still there, or
He's here.
okay.
Go ahead, Stephen.
It's really at the board's discretion. We could pick up an additional parking spot if we did not have that loading zone, but we're just responding to the DRC committee who thought that a loading zone was necessary there. These are office uses primarily. We don't expect a lot of things coming in and out of there. It's easy enough to schedule moving at off hours where there's no parking, but it's at the board's discretion. If we put that loading zone or we pick up an additional parking spot.
Right. So what was in the engineer's report questioned if we needed the loading zone or not, in that there is a loading zone on Bloomfield Avenue, but in discussion with Stephen said the preference is to get loading off of Bloomfield Avenue. It makes things easier, but again, we're leaving up to the board's discretion whether to have that as a loading zone or have it as a parking space.
But we're happy not to have the loading zone encroach on the public access. By the way, if anyone's walked down the alley from Lackawanna, what most pedestrians do is cut right into the parking lot. They generally don't follow the sidewalk. I guess it feels like the least, the quickest path and least resistance. So they'll get to the parking lot and cut right across it. But that's just what we've observed. But in no case will we strike the public access with a loading zone.
Thank you.
And one final thing, Paul, while you're looking at that, the site plan there, it was pointed out that the easement that provides access to the Ice House building is located sort of closer to the Bloomfield Avenue buildings, and that the parking spaces actually encroach onto that easement area. And my question is, can the easement area be relocated so that it basically passes over the parking aisle as opposed to where it's currently shown on the plan?
It certainly could. I believe that I attended that hearing when the easement was created. The owner of Grove Pharmacy had sold that Ice House building to a contractor, and when they sold the landlocked building, they provided him with this basically almost an arbitrary easement through the parking lot to have vehicular access back to the building. That easement could be relocated very easily almost anywhere on lot 18.
I'm not sure I understand the whole specific discussion of what you're talking about in terms of relocated or what you're proposing. One of the problems behind those buildings has been that you can never walk on that easement because the cars almost always overlap it to the point that they're practically touching the building. So you're forced to in the parking lot. So I'm trying to understand it, that's all.
No, Mr. Fleischer, we're not talking about the township easement or right-of-way that's part of the alley. I'm talking about the easement that allows for vehicles and pedestrians to cross over that parking lot from North Willow Street to get to the Ice House building. And it's depicted on this plan.
Yeah, I'll highlight
Yeah.
the extent of the easement. Just for clarification, I'm going to highlight now that it's shown on the survey submitted by the applicant. This is the area of the easement, like this.
Right, okay.
The intent is to provide access from North Willow Street to the Ice House building across the parking lot.
Correct, and that's a different easement than the township easement along those sidewalks on the north side of the buildings.
Right, and what we would do is simply relocate that easement that Graham just delineated and move it so that it basically it runs through the parking aisle and doesn't encroach, so the parking spaces don't encroach into that. And obviously, since Mr. Plocker owns these properties, it's very easy for us to revise the easement.
Okay, I'll have some other questions later on. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I have, Paul. You were, I think, going to talk about the variances next.
I'd like to discuss the zoning, which would be starting with
Well,
slide.
why don't we take questions on the architectural presentation before we do the land use? Good.
Mr. Fleischer, would you like me to go through each member and have them?
Yes.
Okay, I can certainly do that. Let me just grab my list. Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Caulfield.
Thanks, Graham.
Yes, sure.
Paul,
Yes.
a couple questions, if you don't mind. On the east side of the building, it's a 0 lot line with the building next door. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there windows up on that 3rd floor that overlook the 2nd story building?
On the new 3rd floor, the windows are set in.
Okay. How far? Okay. There's that addition set in from that 0 lot line there.
The addition is above the lot line, as you can see on this drawing. Thank you, Graham. So the black walls to the right of where it says proposed addition office use, all the way on the right are on the property line. But then we're indenting the building where it's labeled proposed roof terrace. So there are windows and operable doors, glass doors onto that roof terrace. But where Graham just drew that line, there are no windows since it's on.
Gotcha. Okay, one quick thing. The billiards building and this new proposed addition with the fire escapes, does the billiards building set up that you can walk through the building, get into the fire escape, cut across and get into this? Is it set up very easily for that?
Yeah, so the access to the billiards building is at ground level between the billiards building and this 3A North Willow. So on this diagram, Graham, I don't know if you want to circle where it says proposed stair.
1 second.
Thank you. So just diagonally to the left of that is the entrance to the Jazz House kids space. So that's a ramp to an entry door that takes you to the Jazz House kids level.
Okay. And then like on the 2nd story of the billiards, I could go into the billiards and get to the fire escape and get across to the new addition. Is that correct?
No, this new metal stair only connects the Ice House building and the two buildings that front onto Bloomfield Avenue, that 345 Bloomfield Avenue and 339-343 Bloomfield Avenue. So it connects those three buildings. It does not connect to the billiards building.
It does not connect to the billiards building. Okay. All right. Thank you. And one last question. I think I wrote them down. Bear with me. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll go to Ms. Harris. Do you have any questions for Mr. Sionis? Oh, sorry, Ms. Harris, we can't hear you. I don't know if your phone's on mute.
I don't have any questions.
No questions. Okay. Next, we'll move on to Mr. Simon. Mr. Simon, do you have any questions for Mr. Sionis?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. What is the intended use of the terrace and the open space? Is this just strictly for the tenants of the building?
The terrace and the open space is just outdoor space for the users of these buildings. Yes.
So will the public be able to use that, or will they have access, or is that private property?
The public will have access. It is private property, but Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong. The restaurant type uses in 343 and 345 Bloomfield Avenue, they'll be able to use the courtyard for outdoor seating if they want. The office users in the Ice House building will be able to sit out in the courtyard. Those exterior balconies and walkways will be for the use of the tenants within these buildings. Stephen, do you anticipate any other users in these spaces?
Well, it's hard to tell who's going to rent it, but it's really intended to be a public amenity for the tenants and not private terrace space for them or private courtyard space. It's really meant to be like a public for the public to enjoy. However, if there's a restaurant, they can put tables out there. We'll probably have some benches and some planters to make it a very attractive courtyard, but not for the private use of the tenants in the building.
Okay, and my last question. I'm a little concerned about how you can be trapped in that corner. Is there any other than walking through the actual buildings, especially the ones facing Bloomfield Avenue? Is there any other exit point if you're on the ground floor in that? I'll say the bottom right corner. I'm not sure the direction. I guess that's
It's like
southeast.
Yeah. So you would walk through the courtyard to get out to the that township alleyway or easement. You'd walk through, between the buildings. So you're able to walk underneath this metal stairway and underneath these balconies. So there's nothing stopping you. But yes, just like any other courtyard, there's one way in and one way out, except that you could also, if you had to, you could walk through the buildings, both the Ice House building and the buildings that face Bloomfield Avenue. But yes, the only exterior way in and out of this courtyard is between the Ice House building at the top right and that billiards building, which is on the left.
Right. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moore, do you have any questions for Mr. Sionis?
No questions at the moment.
Okay. Mr. McCullough, any questions for Mr. Sionis?
Yeah, thank you. I have, I think, 3 questions. Thank you all for a very thorough presentation. Very, very helpful.
You're welcome.
What otherwise seemed to be a very confusing and complicated project.
Right.
So, the first question I have is 3A currently is functionally a 2-story building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the first floor is largely sort of garage oriented.
First floor is garage, storage space, warehouse. Yes.
And then the second floor is what?
The most recently it was contractor offices. So the contractor who had owned this space used that second floor for offices for his business.
So would the elevation of the first floor and the second floor be comparable?
I'm sorry, you cut off, John.
I'm sorry, the floor to ceiling.
Yes.
From the first floor and the second floor, would the distance of floor to ceiling be comparable to both floors?
Yes. Yeah. These are high ceiling spaces.
And do you anticipate in this project that the second floor would have to be, that the flooring itself would have to be um, sort of reinstalled, or is it sufficient for the type of project that you're talking about in terms of putting a third story on?
Right. The building is built extremely well. It's oversized timber construction. It held large equipment. I forget the name of the equipment that's on the second floor now that's been there historically. It's almost like it was a piece of equipment that was used to carry and chop ice, large blocks of ice. So the floor loading holds quite a bit. So adding this new floor, primarily we'll be looking at using the corners of the building for the structure to eliminate having columns within the building.
All right. My second question for you is on the easement leading out to Lackawanna Plaza. I was looking at the illumination that you had. Is that easement illuminated all the way to Lackawanna Plaza, or is it only about halfway at 3/4?
There's on our lighting plan, there's an existing township light pole, a tall light fixture with a cobra, what they call a cobra head, which is like a public service PSE&G type fixture, and that provides lighting at least halfway down into that alleyway down towards Lackawanna Plaza. I don't know what the lighting is. Thank you, Graham. So Graham drew a circle around the existing pole that's within that alleyway that has a fixture that provides all of that lighting through that alleyway and partly to the west of it and into the opening between the ice house and the billiards building. I don't know what the lighting is below that. I did not look to measure the lighting from that yellow point that Graham just drew down to the Lackawanna Plaza sidewalk. We can take a look at that.
Yeah, I would appreciate it if you take a look at it. I don't know if it would fall within, your responsibility to provide lighting in the area, but it seems to me that if this is an area that could potentially have increased traffic, especially after dark.
Yeah, we hope so, John, because this was, I mean, for 30 years, I'm very familiar with this alleyway, and it was almost scary. It was not kept up. The facade of the building next to the Ice House building is not kept up. The building, the Montclair Auto Parts, has the chain link fence with the barbed wire. We're hoping that this will be a much more attractive alleyway, and hopefully people will use this. So we will take a look at the lighting, but we could check with the township if they have a record of the light, or we could actually look to see what's on those buildings, or if there's another pole down by Lackawanna Plaza.
But we can't do very much about it. We only own 22 feet of the alley, of the building on the alley.
Right.
We would not have the power to put lighting on the neighbors' buildings who control most of the buildings along both sides of the alley.
Right. So it's another 150 feet of neighboring buildings down to the Lackawanna Plaza that we would not have any control over.
Yeah, my assumption is that it wouldn't fall within your area of responsibility. I wasn't familiar with that easement until I went down to take a look at this project, and so I'm not one of those people that's ever used it. But just based on your presentation, it occurred to me that perhaps it's an area that could use some additional lighting, and that might be something that has to be recommended otherwise.
We'd be happy to do even more than our share to make that alley a more attractive environment, but it's really going to take the cooperation of the building owners on both sides of that.
Right.
There's only so much that we can do on our own since we front very small portion of it.
Right.
You don't own any of those other buildings on it, Stephen?
No, Joe,
No.
neither of those.
Okay.
So I have one additional question, and it happens to be for you, Mr. Plofka. So Stephen, just in terms of my sort of looking at this project and sort of the surrounding area, what I see is a lot of sort of like an entertainment zone, restaurants, recreation, and other businesses of the sort. And so I know that the intent of 3A is for this to be office space. And is there anything that prohibits it from being utilized in the future for more recreationally oriented or restaurant related sort of space? Can you speak to that?
I would hope there's nothing to prevent it. It doesn't have the street frontage, which is, and by the way, all the buildings surrounding it, the one at 7 North Willow, the building we call the Billiards Building, the building we call the Phoenix, all those spaces that front the parking lot are all offices, except for the ones that have Bloomfield Avenue or North Willow Street frontage. They're all offices. So an office use is much more compatible with the immediately surrounding uses. But I'm not opposed to a restaurant. I just think it's more logical that it be office.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
I would like the right to render for either. The reason we're here before the Board of Adjustment is because the office would not be permitted in the ground floor because it's in the C1 zone. Now, the buildings just opposite on 7 North Willow across the parking lot are in the C1, C3 zone. And Graham, you can correct me, but we did not require a variance to put offices there because they're in a different zone with a different requirement.
Mhm.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
I would think, by the way, that granting the variance to the offices doesn't prohibit it from being used for something that's already permitted in the zone. So I would think it could always be used for retail or a restaurant or some other thing that is permitted. Is that not correct, Graham?
Yeah, I think in that situation, the applicant can always abandon the variance and then simply, default back to a permitted use on the ground floor. Graham, would that create any parking implications though if they did that?
It would not, because that's not subject to the new addition. The new addition is the third floor here.
Okay. So
It's the 15%.
Yeah, we don't even need to address it. If we decide to grant the variance, the applicant always has the right to abandon it.
That's what I thought. That's why I asked the question. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, if I might, Mr. Chairman, though, one of the reasons why I asked the question is because we will have that conversation about that striped area and whether or not it ought to convert to being a parking space or whether it ought to be retained as a loading zone. And so thinking not only in terms of the short term, but the potential long-term use of this space could be a factor in what we decided in terms of recommendations.
I would say from my having observed this parking lot, I've never seen open spaces in that parking lot at all. If anything, they overlap the walkways and everything else. That's one of the most crowded parking lots in town. So I'm not sure you could get anything else in there anyway, at least during business hours.
And just, Mr. Chairman and John, just so you know my thinking, this is basically an as-of-right application except for the conversion to office space. But I needed a site plan anyway. And since I had to apply to the planning board for a site plan, I figured I might as well apply to use the ground floor as offices because that's the most logical use. And that's why we're before the board, this board and not the planning board. I was going to require a site plan anyway. It's not much more effort on my part to amend the application to ask for the office use on the ground floor, which I think is probably more logical, but I'm certainly not opposed to a restaurant use back there.
Yeah, I think when we saw it at the design review committee, it was still being represented at the planning board at that time. So I remember that. Any other questions from members of the board? We haven't finished are we finished, Graham, with everyone else?
No, we still have Mr. Church is next.
I have no questions.
Okay. And then just you, Joe, you're next.
Okay. My first question is, can we go back to the whole issue of the trash collection so I understand it better? Because my initial reaction was somehow get it into the building, but when I first saw it. Tell me the essence of, I understand it's a building that's 11 by 16 and got a roof on it. How does the trash collectors get in there? It's certainly not a compactor type thing. They can't go in there and lift it out and throw it onto their truck. So can you explain the whole trash collection?
Sure. It's not a building. It's basically a fenced enclosure with a roof.
Yeah.
Graham, if you wanna-
Yeah, it's right. Sorry, I had it. Here it is.
let's see.
So the trash enclosure is proposed here.
Correct. And basically at the Development Review Commission, it was suggested that we slide the trash enclosure there between the parking space to the north of Graham's Green Circle and a parking space to the south, which hard to see on this, but the parking space to the south is labeled as parking stall number 13. And there are opening doors to this enclosure, both at the north. There are double doors that open into that parking space. And then on the west side, there are double doors sort of on the left side of that circle Graham just drew that open into that parking space directly to the west. And the theory is that the trash collectors would come before this parking lot is occupied, and the hours and days of collection are dictated or directed by Stephen and his staff. And generally, it's usually very early in the morning before the parking lot is occupied. It's not a building, but it's basically an enclosure with corrugated metal walls and a corrugated metal roof on a slope. The doors open so that the trash collectors could slide a dumpster in and out of this enclosure. And again, at the Development Review Commission, they seem to feel, or the consulting engineer thought this would be the best space where we would not lose any parking spaces. And it would be easy for trash collectors to back up or drive into this parking lot, pull the dumpster out, turn it upside down into the vehicle, and then drive away.
Okay, so it will still contain dumpsters. It's not containing trash cans, it's dumpsters. I should have said structure, not building, but it's basically a structure with big doors on it. They go in, they actually pull the container out, then they dump it into the truck.
Right, and they have two ways of getting in and out of the parking. They could drive into lot 18, which is labeled on this drawing, or lot 17, which is just north of it. And then this dumpster just, and I'll talk about this with the zoning, but we're requesting a variance in that this trash enclosure is being placed along that easterly property line rather than having a 4-foot setback. So that easterly property line is shared with the rear wall of that Montclair Auto Parts building. And that's that sort of a high masonry wall there that has the chain link fence on top of it with the barbed wire. So we thought it was preferred to put this trash enclosure up against their wall with chain link fence and barbed wire rather than pulling this into the parking lot at another 4 feet. Just for the sake of some landscaping, which probably wouldn't do well there.
Okay. My next question, the stair tower, the new stair tower, is that used as a means of egress from the buildings?
No, there are stairs within the building. So this is just a decorative connection. So it's
And no, but Paul, it's also the secondary means of egress.
a secondary means of egress.
So it is a secondary means of egress, because I only see one stairway in the building.
Correct.
But in the adjacent buildings, Joe, there's also stairways.
No, I was just asking simply whether or not the issue always comes up about protection, snow protection and everything else when you have the equivalent of an outside stairway. And I was asking it within that context. If it's a required means of egress, then it's going to need something to make sure it doesn't get built up with ice and everything else on it. That's why I asked the question.
Right. We have a roof over that stairway to protect it. And we will design it so that it meets all of the code requirements.
Next question, which is the building itself. I was actually very surprised to see no elevator in this building. This is a brand new office building. Everybody is dealing with the whole issue of accessibility in general. And I guess I was really surprised that this project doesn't contain an elevator for what is essentially a pretty decent climb up to that third level. Any comment on that? I'm not sure if this is quasi available to people who have to come visit these offices and everything else. Not having an elevator in that building, I think just about every building that I've seen, including the other ones on that block, all have elevators in addition to the stairways. Is there a reason why there's no elevator in here?
Joe, I think going back to our initial thoughts on it, it's a very small building. The second and third floors comprise all 3,000 square feet of usable space.
2,800 per floor.
It's hard to absorb the cost of an elevator, which doesn't vary by the size of the building in such a small building. There's nothing.
I'll leave it to code enforcement whether it's needed. I actually think an elevator is needed, but I'll have to leave that.
Paul didn't think so.
Yeah, it's not.
I'm not an expert in that arena, so
Okay,
I don't know
of course,
for
if it
sure.
was required, we put it in, and we certainly would like the option to be able to put one in, but it's really depending on tenancy of that second and third floor. It can't be medical office, in my opinion. I just don't have the park, and if it's a permitted use, which I don't know, so it's got to be something that's fairly low-key use up there, and if I get enough rent and somebody requires it, I'm happy to put it in, but at this point, given the size of the building, we weren't planning on it.
As you know, I actually love the project you do. I'm just surprised in a 3-story building with this height that there's no elevator in there, simply for employees of people who may want to have that space. It seems to me that it's an
size,
issue.
and we actually thought that some of the third floor might be a duplex space from the second floor. There would be internal stairs potentially too. I just never know who's going to walk in the door and want to rent it.
And the other thing I ask, because you only have the one stair, though you have the balconies, is this is not going to be an easy space to subdivide if you only have the single. You had talked about small tenant spaces, yet at the same time we have a building here that's not so easy to subdivide, and at least on the lower floor has some pretty large window openings, which make it even more difficult to subdivide. But
well, Joe, what I thought I'd do if there's a need for that, that would be the north-facing wall has no windows against it, and I would make a fire corridor along that wall.
Okay.
So that all the if I did subdivide the spaces, they would all have 2 means of egress. One out to the balcony egress, and the secondly to the internal stair via a fire corridor.
Now, of course, that balcony on the third floor is not fully covered as it extends all the way to the stair. So I do think there's the issue of, if this is in fact a secondary means of egress, you're going to have to do something to assure that it doesn't get iced over, and you'll get plenty of wind in that courtyard. for sure, especially with the lower building off of Bloomfield Avenue. You're going to get a lot of wind in there. These are just my thoughts on it because I'm concerned about that issue of it being basically only a single stair within the building. So
Yeah, I think that's a very good comment, Paul. We're going to incorporate some covering there.
Over that 10-foot area, yes.
Yeah.
and then my last thing, if we can go to slide 16, I think it was. That was one of the elevations. This is just to tweak Paul a little bit.
Okay.
I'm looking at the proposed southwest elevation, and I'm seeing, unless it's an optical illusion, it looks to me like we got a whole bunch of different heights, and in the wind, it just seemed a little more, or maybe I'm looking at elevation 4. Are those all at the same height, or is it just an optical illusion? It looks very strange.
So they should be. Oh, I see the bottom right there in elevation 4, the window that Graham.
And then even below that, the top of the four set seems to be higher than the single in between, and then there's the spot with the garage door. It doesn't seem to be uniform across there. Just a
Paul, can I answer that?
between architects.
We were trying to just respond to the HPC. I personally, because these are set in existing masonry openings, I'd love it if you overruled them. I think it would look better if they were more uniform myself.
So,
is that accurate?
I think it's probably within your domain to make them more uniform if you wish to.
Fine by me.
Okay.
Those are the only questions I have. So if we want to go on to the land use issues, that's fine.
We do have one public participant that's called in. So I'm going to unmute. We have a phone caller. I'm going to unmute your line. At this time, we're accepting questions of Mr. Sionis' architecture testimony. Okay, Colin.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
Oh, yeah, I mean, any of the testimony thus far, if there's any questions, they're open right now.
Okay.
Do I have a question?
Yes, if you could just state your name first.
And address.
My name is Frank Rubacki, 398 Upper Mountain Avenue. In one of the early maps that Mr. Sionis presented, the alleyway is indicated to be part of the C1 when it's part of the C3. Is there some other reason why it was shown as C1?
I can speak to that. I mean, this is from the official township tax zoning map that's been adopted by the council, and that lot is located in the C1 zone.
Yeah, well, actually, the council did approve it. It was, and actually, they took the map. They approved it on ordinance 016-018 on 5/24, and they had a map attached to the ordinance which showed that it's C3. The tax card also shows it's in the C3, and the planning board's April 17 master plan amendment on page 72 shows it's in C3. So I understand that it's listed elsewhere as C1, and the online map indicates that it's C1. I'm just saying all the supporting documentation that establishes that map is saying otherwise. Okay.
So I'm just going to pull up. This is the zoning map available in E-Code 360. If you click the link here, this is what's been codified within the Township Municipal Ordinance. And if you zoom in, you will see.
Yeah, I checked the map.
That the lot is within the C1 zone. The right of way is within the C1 zone.
I know it's just not what the town approved. I know what the map shows. I'm just saying that the governing body didn't approve it.
Okay. Well, I prepared the map that they approved, so we can talk semantics offline, I guess, Mr. Rubacki, as to and we can review previous documents and submitted materials that went to the council as well.
That's fine.
Okay.
As far as the dumpster, There was an approval for 345, 349 Bloomfield Avenue that required a third dumpster. And I don't know, since they're now asking for a variance on the dumpsters and the placement, I don't know if that dumpster requirement was also included in the plan.
We can certainly create a condition that requires it to adhere to any prior approvals.
Okay, I'm just questioning how you're going to make the dumpsters work and approve them. Mr. Sionis testified there were 27 parking spaces in this plan, which is no change from what is there now. My question is, what was there now? Was that the configuration of the spaces? Was that approved as what there is now? Because aerial views and on-site views show that it's been painted over many different times, many different ways. And I'm particularly concerned with a couple of aspects of what's there. If you look at spaces 22 to 24.
Can you circle that, Graham?
22 through 24. Okay, I need to just jump over to the site plan. Mr. Fleischer's asked me to just highlight spaces 22 through 24 on the site plan. I'm going to zoom into that now. So 22 through 24. Let me just get my annotation tool. Oh, 1 second. So that's these 3 parallel spaces that Mr. Rebecki is referring to.
And what is the question? So
my concern is that, one, these are parallel parking spaces that abut a 90-degree spot, which is overcome. It can be overcome. But the biggest issue, the 2 biggest issues, is that it's an 18-foot space for a parallel parking space. And the minimum for the township, I believe, is 24 or 21 for a compact. An 18-foot space would basically handle a Mini Cooper at best and would not handle a compact, wouldn't handle a Civic, Camry, anything like that. The second part that concerns me is that because it's only an 18-foot space, that space number 24 will, and it should be 21, which means that the overhang will go onto a private sidewalk. And as has been noted before, this is one of the most crowded parking lots in town. Since the township took it upon itself to put parking bollards on township property, we have a history of parking on this lot and the public right-of-way. I don't care how they park internally, but on the public right-of-way, I care very much. So how, Mr. Sionis, how do you, my original question was this the plan, the parking configuration plan that was approved on your prior application for other buildings that were owned here, but you're using this lot to satisfy this? Or is this a change from what was approved?
Alan, I defer to you. Yeah.
I can answer that because I was involved in the prior application before the planning board, which involved the parking lot, and that was approved by the planning board in 2012. And the plan that you're looking at with those 3 spaces is exactly consistent with the plan that the planning board approved.
So, Mr. Rebecki, I was not involved with that application. When I was discussing it before, it was, I think, 1990.
Okay. The other thing is that I'm a little bit concerned about the parking. You talked about the loading zone, and the choice was being offered to either draw the loading zone up until the, well, let's back up for a second. The alleyway has been referred to tonight as an easement, as a right-of-way, a lot of things. I just want to make sure that what you're saying, Mr. Sionis, is it is a tax lot. It is a property owned by the township that extends 8 feet wide for the entire length from North Willow to Black.
Correct. And it's labeled as public right-of-way on the survey. Yes.
But I can answer that, Paul. Mr. Rabaki's correct. That we've been referring to it as an easement or right of way, but it's actually a separate tax lot that is owned by the town.
And it's identified as tax lot 11.
Right.
Right.
It's classified by the town as a vacant property. Mr. Blocker, and you agree that it's classified by the town as a vacant property?
I'm sorry, Mr. Rebecki.
Mr. Blocker had just said that it was lot 11, effectively it's 3206 lot 11. It's a parcel owned by the town. And I'm saying, and it's classified as a vacant property, code 95.
Mr. Rebecki, I take your word for it. I don't have any reason to know either way.
Okay, that's okay. So we don't know it's classified as a right of way then.
It's owned by the town. It's public property owned by the town that's been used as an alleyway connecting North Willow Street to Lackawanna Plaza.
Mr. Rebecki, there's bollards on it that prevent cars or anything else from egressing it. I know we maintain it. We maintain the sidewalk. We do all the snow and garbage removal and everything else. Up until the point of between the other two buildings, that's all I know about it. And I know it's used frequently.
Okay, but the township installed the bollards, or you're saying you installed the bollards?
No, the town got a grant to install them.
Right. Okay, so typically my question is, we would put car stops or bollards on the parking lot, correct? Mr. Sionis.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rebecki, can you repeat that? You kind of trailed off for a second. You're asking if there should be wheel stops at the front of the parking spaces?
Wheel stops or bollards on lot 18 parking spaces rather than on the, we typically don't put bollards on the sidewalks or the right-of-ways or the alleys. We did in this case, granted. My question is, where there are not bollards, would we not put in car stops or bollards, considering the density of that parking space? I specifically refer you to space 17 and also to the loading zone option that would possibly parking space. Whether we would,
I could address that.
would you agree to a condition of parking stops on those two?
Mr. Rebecki.
Wouldn't
Hold on, Mr. Rebecki, this is an opportunity to ask questions, okay? I think you started off with a legitimate question. Do you think it's appropriate to add bollards on lot 18, and you've identified the parking space 17? The site plan and the survey show where the existing bollards are. So the question is, as I understand it, Mr. Sionis, do you think additional wheel stops or bollards are necessary along those parking spaces that are the subject of Mr. Rebecki's question?
I do not,
Okay, and why?
because the township installed bollards. It would be redundant to have bollards in front of bollards or wheel stops in front of the bollards.
No, I was specific to space 17 in the loading zone.
Thank you, Graham. So we started the discussion whether to keep the loading zone there or not. And as Mr. Plofker stated, you know, he doesn't care if we still have the loading zone. He thought it would be a convenience. So I think I have to defer that question. There is a bollard in front of the loading zone that's shown next to where it says PVC. Thank you.
Mr. Rebecki was specifically asking also about space 17. There's a bollard here in front of 18 and here in front of 16, but there is not one here in front of 17. That was also part of his question as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't know why the town did not put a bollard in front of 17.
But as I understand it, Mr. Sionis, your testimony is you don't think it's necessary and you're not proposing one as part of this application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, Mr. Rabaki, do you have any other questions with regard to the testimony thus far?
No, I don't.
Graham, why don't you go see if there's anybody else from the public that may have any questions with regard to the testimony thus far?
Okay, we have no other callers on the line, but I'll make an announcement. If there's anyone else with questions, please speak up at this time. This is for public questions of this testimony so far.
Mr. Tremulek, there's no other questions thus far. When are you going to go through the HBC report and narrow down if there's any issues with regard to the board engineers report? You want to do that now or go into the variances?
You know what, I think we should probably do that now. I don't think it will take long. Mr. Sionis, you've seen the report from the Historic Preservation Commission for this application?
I do not have that in front of me.
Graham, are you able to put that up?
I'm about to display it now.
Thanks, Graham.
Okay, so there are 3 comments contained in that report. Why don't you take a look at them? It's dated January 30, 2020.
Right. So comment number 1 was a suggestion to differentiate the historic portion of the building to the new addition, setting the addition back from the plane of the facade, or the introduction of a brick or stone band course would be considered to provide the differentiation. We comply with that. We added a horizontal band to separate the original building from the proposed addition. You could see that with that black horizontal band on that drawing above the middle floor.
What is that band, Paul? Can you clarify?
Yes. Sorry. We've changed it a few times. It's a painted metal band. Since we're doing the exposed painted lintels, we settled on doing a painted metal band to separate the original building from the upper floor of the building.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The second one, Graham? The applicants return to the Historic Preservation Commission for review of all signage to be installed at the site. We agree to that. That's typical. And the third one is the applicant is to return to the Historic Commission for final review of all exterior finished materials, and we agree to that also.
Now you've agreed that you'll go back for 2 and 3. Has HPC seen, have you addressed item number 1, or do they want another look at that also?
They have not seen it. We could show them that also.
Okay, so Alan, just so we're clear, if this application is approved, it would be subject to complying with conditions 1, 2, and 3 contained in the HPC report of January 30, 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, let's go to the Suburban Engineers Report. That's dated June 10, 2020. I think you can go through that pretty quickly. Number 1, about the parking, I think, Alan, you addressed that up front, and Graham's memo does also. So I think that's a non-issue. The comment number 2 regarding stormwater, I assume that you'll agree to that as a condition?
Yes.
Yes.
Item 3, I know there was some discussion about that. It seems that we got past that with the operator being able to control the trash enclosures delivery. So it doesn't seem like that's an issue. And if we're going to leave the loading space where it is, I think the only condition we need to add to that would be that striping that encroaches into that lot 11 area was going to be removed. And I think you stipulated that to that.
Yes.
So that leaves only, as I'm reading it, condition 2 to be a condition to carry forward. Comment 2 as a condition, rather.
Right. We agree to that. That's about the stormwater, Alan.
Right. And Graham, on your memo of June 4, 2020, you had some planning considerations. And let's just go to, so in case we have to carry any forward in the event of an approval. But I think we addressed all of those based on the conditions we've stated already. Is there anything else that you need to carry forward in your memo?
No, I think all of that has been addressed.
Okay, so Mr. Trembulak, I think we're at a position where the memos have been addressed. You've testified, given us testimony as to the site plan. The only thing we need to hear now is Mr. Sionis put it on his planner's cap and giving us the rationale for the variances.
Correct. So why don't we proceed with that? And Paul, when you're
Thank you,
ready.
Michael. I'm thanking Michael for moving that quickly.
You're welcome.
Okay, Alan, I'm ready.
All right, so, I mean, you're showing the part of your PowerPoint, with, and perhaps you can discuss that, which simply identifies the variances. So if you want to identify what they are and the variances that are needed, and then discuss your planning testimony.
Sure.
In support of each of those variances.
Okay, there are several variances that are requested. First one was discussed. That's a variance from D1, Montclair Code 347-80B, and that's a use variance to permit office use on the first floor of 3A North Willow. As we stated, since it's in the C1 zone, office use is not permitted on the first floor. The applicant stated he would love to have a permitted retail type use on the first floor, but he feels he would not be able to find a retail tenant interested in this landlocked space with no street presence. The second variance is a C variance from 347-83B4, and that's a variance required of the minimum rear yard setback of 10 feet. The proposed third floor will have a 0-foot rear yard setback, and that's because it's aligning with the existing building footprint below, which also has a 0-foot rear yard setback. We're also requesting variance relief from that same section for the rear yard setback for 339, 345 Bloomfield Avenue, and that the proposed covered stair will have a 0-foot rear yard setback. That metal stair replaces an old unroofed wood stair which existed for over 30 years. But since it connects to 339, 345, it will have a 0-foot rear yard setback and it requires a variance. Next one was 347, 100.5D4, and that's a variance required for a 0-foot rear yard setback for the proposed trash enclosure. I discussed that briefly. The enclosure is to be placed on the eastern property line against the Montclair Auto Parts rear wall, that the windowless rear wall, the main wall that has the barbed wire on top of the chain link fence. We felt that the 4-foot setback wouldn't make sense in this application, so we're requesting a variance. The last variance that was listed here has been dropped or deleted. That was, we originally were proposing that ghost sign to be painted on the rear of 363-373 Bloomfield Avenue. But the applicant does not want to install that sign, so we're not asking for a variance for that. So I will briefly go through the variances, the conclusions. So based on my review of the zoning ordinance and considering the characteristics of this property, the surrounding area, the proposed use, my conclusion is that site plan approval can be granted with supporting reasons. For the D1 variance relief to allow business and office use on the first floor, as I said, the applicant would be happy to have a retail user on the ground floor, but he doesn't think a retailer would be interested in leasing this space. There's no street frontage for 3 North Willow. It doesn't lend itself to a retail type user who requires visibility. This building is set back 160 feet from North Willow Street. It's not easy to see it from the street. When we went to the Historic Commission, many of the commissioners said they didn't even know the building was back there. So not only is it not easy to see from the street, but many of the buildings near it are all used as offices. The intent of the ordinance in the C1 zone is to encourage shoppers and pedestrian traffic with no interruption of retail storefronts. That's not the case with this property. The site is more suited, or it's particularly suited to an office use rather than retail. In the past, the zoning board, this zoning board in particular, has granted variances for first floor space located in the rear of buildings that front onto Bloomfield Avenue. And two that we thought of were 491 Bloomfield Avenue, which is Bob Silver's building, which is across the street from the Claremont Theater. The variance was granted to have office space at the rear of the first floor of that building. And then also the Berkshire Hathaway office space in what we know as the former Luna Stage building at the corner of Bell Street and Bloomfield Avenue. A variance was granted to have office space on the ground floor of that building. And then the building was used as contractor offices and a storage facility and a warehouse for at least 35 years. The building's really calling out to be given new life. It doesn't fit in with everything Stephen's done in this neighborhood. So it's calling for redevelopment and for Stephen's hand in it. There's positive criteria that I could list for granting the D variance. The application advances the purposes of the municipal land use law. Specifically, it promotes a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques, and that's planning argument 2I. The building and site are not attractive now, but will be very attractive upon completion. Second is that we're promoting the conservation of a historic site. 339, 345 Bloomfield Avenue, which is part of this application, are both within the listed historic district. Even though 3A North Willow Street was constructed around 1920 and has a very interesting history, it was not added to the district. But merging these two lots allows the conservation and rehabilitation of the buildings on both lots, both Lot 3 and 3.01. We're creating really attractive outdoor spaces with this courtyard and also with the exterior balconies and the terrace, something people will be looking for both in the present and the post-coronavirus environment. I think we've been hearing that outdoor space is important, and Stephen pinpointed that pretty early on, that it's going to be important for his tenants to have good outdoor space. As far as the negative criteria, there's no substantial detriment to the public good, as this project will significantly improve this property. There should be little or no adverse effect on area properties. Actually, the applicant owns many of these properties, many of the surrounding properties, so there's no adverse effect on him. He just wants to fix up the properties that he owns, and he's been doing a good job. The only windows that look out onto the site are from buildings that are owned by this applicant. There's no change in the building footprint. There's no reduction in setbacks. External changes to the building will improve the appearance, even though it's not very visible, as we've stated several times. And then based on the zoning ordinance, additional parking is not required for the addition. Also, there's no substantial impairment of the zoning plan or the zoning ordinance. The application eliminates the former industrial type uses, including the warehouse and storage. Additional parking is not required. By merging the lots, up to 15% of floor area can be added without requiring additional parking. Based on the parking diagram, there's over 300 parking spaces within 800 feet, or about a sixth of a mile maximum, plus this public transportation. The applicant has a parking attendant on staff to control and direct parking. If coming by car, the users will park in one of several lots that the applicant owns. At any stated, parking will not be assigned. The applicant owns several parking lots in this area. He owns the indoor garage of the adjacent Phoenix building. He owns lot 18 parking lot, lot 17 parking lot. He owns parking in the basement of the Diva building. He owns proposed parking in the new lot he's creating next to the Diva building. Plus, he's creating extra parking in the new building that's under construction that we call Glen Willow at the corner of Glenridge Avenue, North Willow Street, where we've designed 2 levels of parking, but not all of that was required for that building. And Stephen requested that additional parking be designed into that building as overflow for the surrounding properties. As to the other variances for the setbacks, they can be justified by the C1 analysis and the C2 analysis. And the C1 analysis looks at the shape and size of the existing lot and the lawfully existing buildings on the lot. So we're limited by the shape and size of the lot and the lawfully existing structure on the lot. It is what it is. We're using the existing footprint for 3A North Willow. We're not expanding it at all. The setbacks refer to existing conditions that we're matching. We're not creating any additional encroachments. The existing 8-foot wide alleyway that's a township right-of-way or township parcel, effectively that provides an additional buffer between 3A North Willow and the adjacent building to the north. The adjacent building to the north is the Montclair Auto Parts building, which is windowless. And as I've repeated, it has the chain link fence with the barbed wire on top. But we still have that 8-foot township alleyway between 3A North Willow and that building. The adjacent building directly to the west, which is the billiards building, that's owned by this applicant. There's no impact to that property. Also, it's logical to place the trash enclosure on the eastern property line up against that windowless masonry wall with the chain link fence and the barbed wire, rather than setting it in 4 feet and taking 4 feet away from parking. As was repeated several times, the parking lot gets crowded, so we don't need to take 4 feet out of the parking lot. The first time there'll be an attractive trash and recycling enclosure to accommodate trash and dumpsters for several of the buildings that are under common ownership. Right now, there are dumpsters sitting in the parking lot up against that property line, but for the first time, this will be a trash enclosure that'll be attractive with corrugated metal walls plus a corrugated roof. Under the C2 grounds, the purposes of zoning are advanced, the benefits substantially outweigh any detriment. This application represents significant improvements to this property, a continuation of everything that Mr. Plofker has done in this surrounding area. The ghost sign variance request has been withdrawn. And then finally, as Mr. Sullivan taught me, I looked to the Montclair master plan to see what it tells us about this application. So I reviewed the latest adoption of the Montclair Township Unified Land Use plus Circulation Element dated April 24th, 2017. And specifically on page 6, the plan states that Montclair Center is a premier mixed-use commercial center that is a vibrant, safe, clean, and wonderful place to live, shop, and work. For much of its recent history, 3A North Willow was not vibrant, clean, or a wonderful place to work. It was reflected both on the exterior of this building, and as you can see on the existing photographs, it really wasn't vibrant. It didn't look like an attractive place to be in to work. But based on this proposal, it will be, along with many improvements that the applicant has already made to the surrounding projects and that he's made to other projects in Montclair. And then one of the recommendations that was noted in the 2017 master plan update was that a recommendation that the township should continue the practice of exempting the first 15% of additions from meeting parking requirements of the C1 zone. And in this land use element, it states that the language about exempting the 15% of additions, the language allows for small additions and renovations in the C1 zone without requiring new parking, which provides a very effective incentive to rehabilitate existing buildings with minimal expansion to the total building area. So that's exactly what's being proposed here. By merging the two lots, the applicant has the benefit of being able to rehabilitate this existing building with a minimal expansion to 3A North Willow. So that concludes my testimony. Again, it's an exciting project. It's hard to understand what's proposed until you see that animation. I think that really helps to understand what's going on between the balconies, the courtyard, the indentation of that top floor. It's pretty exciting. It'll be a great place for somebody to work. It'll be a great place for people to sit in the courtyard or on the terraces. Thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Fleischer, we'll do questioning of the board
Questions from members of the board, yeah.
Okay, so we'll go through one by one again. Mr. Caulfield, do you have any questions for Mr. Sionis' planning testimony?
No, not at this time.
Ms. Harris, any questions for Mr. Sionis?
No, I do not.
Mr. Simon, any questions for Mr. Sionis?
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Moore, any questions for Mr. Sionis' testimony?
I do not.
Mr. McCullough, any questions for Mr. Sionis?
No?
Mr. Church, any questions for Mr. Sionis following his testimony?
No, I don't.
Okay. And Mr. Fleischer?
Yeah, the only issue I have is I assume we'll make a condition that the lots be merged, would be a condition of this approval.
Yes.
Yes.
And Joe, I had one question also following up on that.
Please, Mike, yeah.
The D1 use variance, as I understand it, is going to be limited to general business and professional office, and we're excluding medical office. Is that correct?
I believe we should at this time.
Yeah, I thought Mr. Plofker said that he didn't think that was appropriate there, and I think we can make it a condition that that's limited, that ground floor is limited to general business and professional office.
Okay. So next we'll open it up to questions for members of the public. Mr. Rabacki, do you have any questions for Mr. Sionis' testimony?
You could do it at this point. Mr. Tremblay, you have no further witnesses, correct?
That's correct.
So if there's any member of the public, I think now what they should make, they should ask any questions of the additional testimony and also make any comments if they choose to do so.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabacki, your line is unmuted at this time.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Rebecca, I'm going to swear you in case you make any comments. So would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth and the matter before the board?
Yes, I do.
Okay, proceed.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, I have no problem with the application as far as what's being built, and I'm generally supportive of the design. My concern, my primary concern is really the public right-of-way. Basically, lot 3206, lot 11 of block 3206. This is a property that has not been well taken care of by the town. We've heard testimony tonight about how it was a pedestrian right-of-way, alleyway, but the township has poorly lit it. It's not signed at all to indicate to anybody that they can use it. And in this day of pandemics, you would think we would be trying to have organizations like Bike Walk Montclair might actually want to support protecting pedestrian alleyways. And I think it's really incumbent on this board to look at this, and knowing the direction Montclair is going as far as more and more urbanized, that we protect these alleys and these pedestrian ways, whatever they want to be and what they might turn out to be, as much as possible. This alley is part of the master plan. It's one of 7 or 8 alleys listed in the master plan specifically. Alleys are a specific resource to the town. And so I'm concerned about the parking, where the township made a big mistake. They took $111,000 of community block grant money, which goes to low and moderate income purposes, and basically paid to improve Mr. Plofker's situation there. He was a beneficiary, let's put it that way. And I was very disappointed by the council for doing that and using low and moderate income money for that purpose. I think that you need to be very sensitive about the loading zone. I think you need to do everything you can to make sure that the future of that alley is protected, both with hard conditions and with an approach to that alley that it is an asset that we need to protect. And my last question, not question, is comment is I missed any commentary as far as handicap parking. I really don't care if you put it in there because it's so crowded now at this point, but I didn't see any handicap parking except for a sign that was going to be placed again on the public right of way, which I don't think they're allowed to do. Thank you. I'm sorry, is there any questions for me?
I have a question about whether or not we can ask the applicant to use the applicant's influence to have discussions with the township about improving the conditions on the alley.
A question for me?
No, it's a question for the applicant. In a sense, I think he said he would try to see if he could be helpful, but it would be good to somehow put it on the record that there is value to that alley and that we'd like that alley maintained throughout its length, and just have that as a comment within the approval.
Yeah, Joe, I think we've talked about that. It's part of the record. It's not something I think we typically would make a condition of any approval.
No, not a condition. I didn't mean it as a condition. It's more a request of the applicant to use whatever influence the applicant may have to influence the township to maintain that. I'm not an attorney. I don't know these things for sure. It's a question.
I think Mr. Plofker indicated he would like to see the alley improved, so I assume he would engage in conversation, if you will, with town officials about perhaps adding lighting or making other improvements.
That's all I was looking for, is that type of commitment to going forward with that type of action on his behalf.
No, we'll reach out to the two adjacent property owners, and I'll try to get them to spend some money too, to make it the walls of those two buildings as space in the alley really need improvement to make it a better space. But we'll contact them and try to get them to agree and get the town involved.
And hopefully the town would be willing to do something to help out to get some lighting in there as well, going down to Lackawanna Plaza. I think that was one of the issues that was raised. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other public questions or comments at this time? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Chair, I think
we should go into discussion and then vote after we've completed discussion.
Okay, so I'll begin discussion. We'll go board member by board member once again. We'll start discussion with Mr. Caulfield.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Stephen, for coming out tonight. I'm always concerned about parking. I think we're always at that tipping point with parking, and we have a project. I don't think 30 spaces are what this project needs, but I always feel we always forget parking. As for the alleyway, I mean, maybe getting the bid involved on that or something. I mean, Stephen, you can actually kind of maybe create that make it the signage or something that people can come through there, because I didn't know that existed until I walked through it today, and I could see people getting confused when they get up to the property where to go next. And I think there's some good things to do on that public easement or that right of way to really make it stand out. Which would be great for the town as well as for anything. And, the easement of the car, there used to be a driveway that used to come over that easement. That's going to be gone. So that's going to be a good thing. Overall, I'm supporting of this project because, this is a lot behind, in kind of behind the back of the building, and, it needs something like that. So I'm in favor of this project. Thank you.
Okay, next, Ms. Harris. Oh, hang on, Ms. Harris, you're on mute. I'll unmute your line. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm in favor of this project. I think the D variance for this building makes sense. Given that there's no street frontage, it would not be very attractive to a retail or personal services use. So I'm in favor of the D variance, and all of the other variances are basically existing conditions that aren't being exacerbated by this application. So I'm in favor of the other variances as well.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Simon?
I'm in favor of the application. I especially appreciate the public access to the balconies. So I'm in favor.
Okay. Mr. Moore?
I'm in favor of the application. I don't see it as a detriment to the community in which it resides. I think that the existing site has been underutilized. So with this, with these variances and the development of it, I think that it will certainly be an asset and best use. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Mr. McCullough.
I support the application.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Church.
I support the application.
Okay. And Mr. Fleischer.
I'm also in favor of the application. I think it's a really fine project, and I have no problem with the D variance that's required, because in fact it has no street frontage. It's certainly not on the main street, even though it's tucked in there. I'd like you and Mr. Sullivan to go through the conditions again before we vote. I also have the great concern about the whole issue of parking in that area. That lot is usually crazy, and I'm glad the bollards are in there. I don't care whether they're on in the township's area or on the parking lot, because prior to that, cars just park literally right up to the nose of the building, making it impossible to walk there. So I find that very good. I find the solution to be thoughtful. I would like to see work done on the alley, and certainly some of the conditions we've talked about, I think we need to have noted. But I'm basically strongly in favor of this, and I'd like to figure out how we solve the parking problems, but it's not going to be solved by this project, I'm certain.
So I know we didn't give Mr. Trembulack an opportunity to make a summation, but since it's going his way, I think we'll go straight to the conditions and see if we can put a motion together.
I know when to keep my mouth shut.
Until he objects.
So this is an application for site plan approval, a D1 use variance, and bulk variances relating to setbacks. The conditions that we've discussed thus far would include elimination of the ghost sign, and all remaining signs shall conform to the ordinance. The elimination of the striped area associated with the loading space on lot 18, so as not to encroach into the township-owned property, lot 11. The access easement will be relocated outside of parking spaces 14 through 21 and coincide with the parking aisle to provide the same access. The applicant would comply with all prior conditions of approval not inconsistent herewith. The applicant would comply with comments 1, 2, and 3 contained in the HPC report dated January 30, 2020. The applicant will comply with comment 2 contained in the Suburban Consulting Engineers report dated June 10, 2020. And the applicant shall file a consolidation deed merging the two lots that are the subject of this application. And the use variance, the D1 use variance granted for the ground floor would be limited to general business and professional office, and medical office use would not be allowed. Those are the conditions that I have.
And
That works fine. I think that covers it all. Is that acceptable, Mr. Tremulak?
yes, sir.
So let's
We need a motion. I think first we need a motion, yes.
I can't make it.
I move approval on the basis of the conditions established by.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. McCullough. Do we have a second?
I second.
Mr. Moore with the second. Okay, and we'll call the roll. Mr. Caulfield.
Yes.
Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris?
Yes, sorry about that.
No worries. Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough,
Yes.
Mr. Church,
Yes.
and Mr. Fleischer.
Yes.
Okay, the application is approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
We got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Graham, thank you very much. Michael, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I
Thank you,
need as
everybody.
help as I can
Thank you,
get
everyone.
when I'm running these things. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Greg.
Right.